Wanted to show you guys part 2 of my bread making. Where I left off last time, we had created the dough. It's a no-knead method, and I said you just put the lid on and leave it on your counter until it rose up to basically touch the lid or double in size. We've actually used some of the dough, so it did touch the lid. We've made pizza with it since then. And you want it to kind of look like this. It's a little bit more liquidy than a standard dough would be, but not much. And now I'm going to show you how I turned this into bread. We stuck this after it rose up. We stuck it in the fridge. I find it easier to work with when it's cold. And it will store in the fridge for up to 2 weeks. It's never lasted that long in our house. But you don't have to make the bread all in one day. Like, make it, let it rise, stick it in the fridge, and then make the rest of it a week later. So I just take some flour and sprinkle it down so that stuff doesn't stick. You can get just a little bit on your hands because it is going to be quite wet. You want to grab out kind of a handful. It normally compares it to different kinds of fruit. That probably wasn't quite enough. Like a small cantaloupe, maybe, bigger than a baseball, bigger than a softball. You're not really kneading it. I just like to get it covered in flour. And then I'm just going to turn it so that like the top is smooth. So you're basically like pulling it underneath. And then I'm sticking it in a greased pan so that it looks just like that. It kind of sits in the middle. You want it to be about that full. Again, this is why I'm bad at recipes. I don't measure it or do anything like that. The end. That's it. I am going to cover it with, this is just a clean cloth napkin. I cover it with that, and I don't touch it until I see it start to raise the napkin up a little bit. And again, it depends totally on how warm your kitchen is, what kind of yeast, if you've got commercial yeast or sourdough starter. Sourdough starter is going to take longer, but the longer it takes, the more your flavors develop, so that's fine. Anywhere from an hour to 6 hours. I know theoretically you don't want it to overprove. I've never had that problem. Sometimes I forget it for overnight and then bake it the next morning and it's still fine. So anywhere from 1 to 6 hours. And then I bake at 400 for like 20 to 30 minutes, kind of keep an eye on it until it looks right. I like to let it get nice and brown on the top or like a golden. I find I often want to pull it out before it's quite baked all the way through. So that's it. I said 5 minutes a day or less, and that is all she wrote. I am going to try to make bagels today with it. I never have good luck with bagels. They always swell. They're always too small and the holes close. So I'm going to try that again. I do have a confession to make. What I said at the beginning of this episode is what normally happens when you stir it all together, you mix all your ingredients, you let it rise. With sourdough starter, I let it rise overnight, and then I come back in the morning and it's risen to the top. With commercial yeast, it's less time than that, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on how warm your kitchen is. I've made bread 1,000 times, and that is how it has worked all 1,000 times. But this time, I did something really dumb. When I made the video, I was so intent on making the video that I wasn't paying attention, and the white sourdough starter that I dumped in, I thought it was a sourdough starter in the video. I let it rise overnight, and I came down the next morning, and it was not risen at all. Nothing had happened. And I've made bread 1,000 times, and that has never happened to me. And I fed the starter and I left it out on the counter, and the starter wasn't acting right either. So I thought, my sourdough starter died, what's happening? I did just dump commercial yeast. I put in a tablespoon of commercial yeast into the dough, and so this is the same dough that you saw on the video. It rose just fine with the commercial yeast. I just stirred it in and let it rise for a couple hours, and it rose just fine and stuck it in the fridge. You know what I'd added instead of sourdough starter? Yogurt. Yogurt does not make your bread rise. We make our own yogurt, and I keep everything in mason jars, so something white and gooey in the fridge. I thought it was my sourdough starter. Maybe label your stuff. But I thought it was a good illustration. 1, I mess stuff up a lot, and it's still fine. And 2, if your bread doesn't rise the first try, add a little bit more yeast, and it's probably going to be fine. We made pizza, so you may be wondering, I probably added, I don't know, half a cup of yogurt to this. you may be wondering, well, wouldn't the half a cup of yogurt make your bread different? It wasn't noticeably different. It might be a little bit softer, like chewier, or not chewier, but not so brittle, which I kind of like. It more like an American white bread, like a sandwich bread, rather than a sort of like a crusty French loaf, which is what you tend to get a little bit more of this. So who knows? I may do this on purpose. So yeah, label your jars of white gooey stuff in the fridge, and don't put yogurt in your bread dough instead of a sourdough starter. So I may show you the finished product of the bread later, but I mean, you guys all know what bread looks like, so I might not. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoy and make some bread.